As somebody for whom English is my mother tongue, I always feel that in many ways it's a continuation of colonial dominance. It's often how it's perceived, but a way of saving the world. Right, we'll talk about that at lunch. Okay, our next speaker is going to look at the issue, as I said earlier, about whether Europe's poor are hit hardest by environmental problems. And for that, it gives me very great pleasure to welcome Michael Marmot to the platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was so impressed by Professor van Parijs's injunction not only to think globally and act locally, but to think locally and act globally, that I forgive him for being a Rawlsian. In a way, that injunction to act globally as well as think locally could describe what we tried to do with the Commission on Social Determinants of Health. This was set up by the World Health Organization. We produced our report last August, and we called it Closing the Gap in a Generation. We were concerned with health inequities. The language that was used yesterday is consistent with the language that we used in our report. We defined health inequities as those inequalities that are judged to be avoidable. And because they are not avoidable, because they are not avoided, although avoidable, they are therefore unfair, hence inequitable. By health inequities, we do not mean simply inequitable access to health care. We mean inequitable health outcomes, differences in health, only one component of which is the unfair distribution of access to health care. That these differences, and that will be the thrust of what I want to say, these differences arise because of the way society is organized, globally and within countries. And we put social justice right at the center of what we were trying to achieve. Because we judge health inequities to be health inequalities that are avoidable, then putting them right is a matter of social justice. And we made that argument in the face of the pressures simply to go down the economic route. People said, no government will take you seriously unless you can show it's good for the economy. And we resisted that. We said the reason for taking action on health inequities within and between countries is a matter of social justice. We should do it because it's the right thing to do. We put empowerment right at the center of our concern. We saw empowerment as being material. If you don't have the wherewithal to feed your children, you can't be empowered. As psychosocial, having control over your life, and political, having voice. And that, of course, can be at the individual, at the community, or indeed at the national level. And what we were seeking to achieve is to create the conditions for people to take control of their lives. This got some press when we published our report. In the Scottish city of Glasgow, life expectancy for men in the worst off area is 54. In the best off area, it's 82. A 28-year difference in life expectancy about 12 kilometres apart within one city. And in the worst off area of Glasgow, life expectancy for men is 8 years shorter than the average for India. In India, 75% of the population live on $2 a day or less. No one in Glasgow lives on $2 a day. In Glasgow, they don't die of diarrheal disease or malaria. They die of cancer and heart disease and violent deaths and other alcohol-related deaths. They die of the same causes of death that everybody else does, just at a faster rate. In the United States, in downtown Washington, life expectancy 63, more or less the same for men as it is in India, and in the suburbs, suburban Maryland, 17 years longer. And again, men in downtown Washington die of the same distribution of causes of death that men in the suburbs die from. They just die earlier, dramatically so. So we're concerned with the inequities within and between countries. And you can see this graded relation. Look at Estonia. This is change in life expectancy at age 25 by educational level, low, mid, and university for men and for women. There is a gradient, a graded relation between educational level and life expectancy. In the 1987 to 1990 figures, 10 years later, the gradients got steeper because life expectancy has improved for people with university education, and it went down for those with basic education. So the gradient got steeper. It means we should be concerned not only with the worst off, but with the whole of society. If we only target the poorest 10%, we miss most of the health problem, because the relation between social position and health is a graded one, not just in Europe. This is under 5 mortality per 1,000 live births. When we think globally, we tend to think of the problem of the poorest of the poor. And indeed, the poorest of the poor have great claim on our attention because of their disastrously poor health. But look at India, for example. Under 5 mortality in the second top wealth quintile is higher than in the top wealth quintile. In the third top, it's higher than in the second. In the fourth, higher than in the third. And in the bottom, higher than in the fourth. It's a graded phenomenon. If we focus only on the poorest of the poor, we miss most of the problem. And that suggests action across the whole of society. Is one of the reasons that I was always uncomfortable with social exclusion. Social exclusion implies focusing on some unfortunate subgroup. Very important that people not be excluded. But this is a graded phenomenon, which somehow isn't captured by the concept of social exclusion. And we see these inequalities in health, or inequities, avoidable inequalities, across Europe. And what you can see, these are absolute inequalities by educational level for men, that in the newer member states, Slovenia, Hungary, Czech Republic, Poland, etc., the inequalities in mortality are bigger than they are in the older member states. Even in Sweden, which we like to think of as an example of caring for all its citizens, between 1986 and 2003, the inequalities in mortality got bigger. This is life expectancy at age 30 by level of education. It improved for everybody, by 0.7 of a year for those with the least level of education, by 1.8 years for those with upper secondary, and by 3 years for those with post-secondary. So the inequalities got bigger over time. Even in Sweden, it's a major challenge, because the nature of the relation between socioeconomic position and mortality is not fixed. It can change over time. It can get bigger. In Russia, the widening trend in mortality by education